Story 1. The Squatter in the Ski Lodge. This happened last winter, right after I finished my final semester of grad school. I was in that weird limbo phase. No classes, no job lined up yet, just waiting for my diploma to arrive in the mail. I was burnt out and broke, living back at my parents' house in Denver, Colorado. My dad's brother, Uncle Jerry, owns this massive A-frame cabin up in Breckenridge. It's a beautiful place, tucked away in the pines, totally isolated from the main tourist strip. Jerry usually rents it out during ski season for an insane amount of money, but he had a gap in bookings for a week in late January. He asked if I wanted to go up there, check on the pipes to make sure they hadn't frozen, and just enjoy a few days of solitude. I jumped at the chance. Free lodging in Breck? Yes, please. I drove up on a Tuesday afternoon. The roads were icy, and a storm was rolling in over the Rockies, turning the sky a bruised purple color. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the snow was coming down hard. The cabin was dead silent. You know that specific kind of silence you get in the mountains when it snows? It's heavy. It muffles everything. I did my rounds, checked the thermostat, ran the faucets, made sure the hot tub cover was latched. Everything seemed fine. I made myself some chili, drank a beer, and sat by the fire reading. It was peaceful, but also a little unnerving. The cabin sleeps 12 people comfortably. Being the only living soul in a space that big makes you feel small. Every creak of the wood settling sounded like a footstep. Around 11 p.m., I decided to crash. Usually when the family goes up, I get stuck on the pull-out couch in the basement. But since I was alone, I took the master suite on the top floor. It has vaulted ceilings, a private balcony, and a massive walk-in closet. I locked the bedroom door, just a habit from living in the city, and passed out almost immediately. I woke up at 2:37 a.m. I remember the time exactly because the glowing red numbers on the alarm clock were the only thing I could see. I didn't wake up naturally. A sound had pulled me out of sleep. Thump. It was muffled, dull, like a heavy coat falling off a hanger. And it came from inside the walk-in closet. I laid there, frozen. My brain tried to rationalize it. It's just snow sliding off the roof. It's the house settling. I stared at the closet door. It was a sliding Bond-style door, and I was 90% sure I had closed it completely before bed. Now there was a black gap about 2 inches wide. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I wanted to get up and check, but my body wouldn't cooperate. It wasn't sleep paralysis exactly, but it was that primal fear where your lizard brain tells you, if you don't move, it can't see you. Then I saw it. Through the crack in the closet door, a hand appeared. It wasn't a ghostly hand. It was a dirty, calloused human hand. It gripped the edge of the door and slowly, agonizingly slowly, slid it open. I squeezed my eyes shut. I know it sounds cowardly, but I was terrified. I feigned sleep. I slowed my breathing, praying that whoever it was would just leave. I heard the floorboards creak. Creak. Someone stepped out of the closet. I opened my eyes just a slit, barely enough to see through my eyelashes. Standing at the foot of the bed was a man. He was tall, wearing a filthy, oversized parka that looked like it had been pulled out of a dumpster. He had a thick, matted beard. He just stood there, watching me. He didn't look around the room. He didn't look for valuables. His eyes were locked on my sleeping form. He stood there for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only 30 seconds. Then he turned, and walked toward the bedroom door. I heard him unlock it. Click. He opened the door and walked out into the hallway. I listened to his heavy boots thudding against the hardwood floor. But he didn't go downstairs to the front door. He went up. There's a small loft above the master bedroom, accessible by a narrow spiral staircase in the hall. It's mostly used for storage. There is no exit from the loft. He was still in the house. The second I heard his footsteps stop overhead, I snapped out of my trance. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and whispered my address to the dispatcher. Then I bolted. I didn't even put on shoes. I ran downstairs in my socks, grabbed my car keys, and flew out the front door into the snow. I locked myself in my freezing car and waited. The Summit County Sheriff deputies arrived fast, about 10 minutes later. I saw their flashlights sweeping through the windows of the dark cabin. When they came back out, they looked confused. "Son, the house is empty," one deputy said. "We checked everywhere." No signs of forced entry. "He went up to the loft," I insisted, shivering in the passenger seat of the squad car. "I heard him go up." The deputy sighed, but agreed to check again. This time, I went with them, staying close to the guy with the shotgun. We went up to the loft. It was empty. Just stacks of old board games and extra blankets. But then, the deputy shined his light up at the ceiling. There was a skylight in the loft. It was unlatched and pushed open about a foot. Snow was drifting in onto the floor. "He went onto the roof," the deputy muttered. He climbed out onto the snowy shingles. A moment later, he shouted, "Got him!" Huddled behind the chimney, shivering violently and half frozen, was the man from my room. It turned out he had been living in the crawlspace behind the master closet for weeks. He had a little nest back there, candy wrappers, empty water bottles, and a peephole drilled through the drywall so he could watch the bedroom. The police said he was a drifter who knew which cabins were empty during the week. But the scariest part wasn't that he was squatting. When they handcuffed him and dragged him past me, he looked me right in the eye and smiled. His teeth were yellow and rotted. "You have a nice sleep," he whispered. I never went back to Uncle Jerry's cabin. And now, I check every closet in my apartment before I go to bed. Every single night. Story 2. The device under the pillow. I grew up in Missouri, right on the edge of the Ozark National Forest. If you're not from around here, the Ozarks are beautiful. Rolling hills, limestone bluffs, thick oak forests. But at night, they are pitch black and incredibly isolating. My buddy Lucas has a family cabin about 40 miles off the grid near Table Rock Lake. Cabin is a generous word. It's basically a 2-story wooden box with a tin roof, no Wi-Fi, and spotty cell service. His dad uses it for deer season, but it sits empty for most of the summer. Last July, Lucas and I decided to head up there for a weekend. We were both 24, burnt out from our entry-level corporate jobs, and just wanted to drink cheap beer, grill some steaks, and shoot empty cans off the porch. We drove up in Lucas's truck on a Friday. The drive-in was rough, 3 miles of dirt road that was more pothole than gravel. When we got there, the place smelled stale, like pine sol and old dust, but it was fine. We spent the day down by the lake, fishing and sweating in the humidity. By the time the sun went down, we were exhausted. We grilled some burgers on the deck, watched the fireflies blink in the tree line, and crashed around 11 p.m. The cabin layout is simple. A living room and kitchen downstairs, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. I took the room on the left, Lucas took the room on the right. I fell asleep instantly, aided by the heat and the beer. I don't know what time it was when the sound started. It wasn't a scream or a bang. It was a high-pitched, rhythmic, electronic squeal. I jolted awake, heart hammering. At first, I thought it was a smoke detector dying. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. The sound was piercing, cutting through the silence of the woods. I jumped out of bed and ran into the hallway. Lucas was already there, looking disheveled and confused, holding a baseball bat. "Is that a fire alarm?" I yelled over the noise. "No," Lucas shouted back. "The detectors are all downstairs. That sound, it's coming from the attic." Now, the attic wasn't really a full floor. It was a small crawl space used for storage, accessible by a pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. We stood under the hatch. The sound was definitely coming from up there. Lucas handed me the flashlight he'd grabbed. "Hold this, I'm pulling it down." He yanked the cord. The ladder slid down with a rusty screech. The electronic squeal got louder, clearer. We climbed up, Lucas first, me right behind him with the light. The attic was suffocatingly hot. It was piled high with old cardboard boxes, camping gear, and dusty tarps. We scanned the room with the beam. Nothing seemed out of place. "Over there," Lucas pointed to the far corner near the chimney. Tucked behind a stack of old hunting magazines was a small, black plastic box. It looked like a garage door opener, or one of those old-school pagers. A red LED light on it was flashing in sync with the noise. Lucas reached out and grabbed it. The second he touched it, he recoiled. "It's hot," he whispered. "Like, physically warm." He flipped it over. There was a single toggle switch on the side. He flicked it. The noise stopped instantly. Silence rushed back into the attic, heavy and oppressive. "What is that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I have no idea," Lucas said, turning it over in his hands. "My dad doesn't own any electronics like this." We stared at the black box. Then, Lucas did something that made my blood run cold. He flicked the switch back on. He flicked it off. Silence. He looked at me, his face pale in the flashlight beam. "Dude, this isn't a timer. It's a manual switch. It doesn't go off automatically." The realization hit us both at the exact same second. For this thing to start making noise, someone had to have flipped that switch. 5 minutes ago. "We need to get out," I whispered. "Go," Lucas said. We scrambled down the ladder, practically falling into the hallway. We didn't bother packing. We didn't bother changing out of our boxers and t-shirts. We grabbed the truck keys from the kitchen counter and sprinted out the front door. We jumped into Lucas's truck, locked the doors, and tore down the driveway, kicking up gravel. We didn't stop until we hit the main highway, where we finally got enough signal to call 911. We waited for the sheriff's deputies at a gas station about 20 miles away. When we led them back to the cabin an hour later, the sun was just starting to crack over the horizon. The police did a sweep. When they came out, the officer looked grim. "You boys are lucky you left when you did," he said. He took us back upstairs. In the attic, the boxes we had seen earlier were shoved aside. Behind the chimney, right where we had found the device, was a small sleeping bag and a pile of food wrappers. Someone had been living up there. But that wasn't the worst part. The officer pointed to the small gable vent window at the end of the attic. The screen had been cut from the inside. "Whoever it was, the officer said. Was probably hiding behind those tarps when you two came up the ladder. You found his distraction device, so he waited for you to run. Then he slipped out the window. We stood there, staring at the empty space behind the chimney. We had been standing 3 feet away from him. We never found out who it was. Lucas's dad sold the cabin a month later. He said he went up there to clean it out and found that all the knives in the kitchen block were missing. I still wonder why he set off the alarm. Was he trying to scare us away? Or was he trying to lure us up into the tight, cramped attic where we couldn't run? Story 3. The bonfire across the lake. This happened about 3 years ago, right after I graduated nursing school. I was living that classic, broke post-grad life, staying in my childhood bedroom, picking up shifts where I could, and trying to save every penny. So, when my college roommate Chloe invited me and 2 other girls, Jenna and Danny, to her parents' lake house in the Adirondacks for a long weekend, I didn't hesitate. Chloe comes from serious money. I knew the house would be nice, but I wasn't prepared for the reality. It wasn't a cabin. It was a sprawling glass and stone estate, sitting right on the edge of a private section of the lake. It was miles from the nearest town, surrounded by dense pine forests. We spent the first 2 days living the dream, drinking mimosas on the dock, swimming, and pretending we didn't have student loans. On the second night, Saturday, we decided to have a bonfire down by the water. It was around 10 p.m., pitch black outside, except for the fire and the stars reflecting off the glassy water. We were listening to music and roasting marshmallows when we saw a boat approaching. It was a sleek, expensive-looking wakeboard boat drifting slowly toward our dock with its navigation lights on. 3 guys were on board. They cut the engine and drifted close enough to talk. They seemed normal, handsome, mid-20s, wearing Patagonia fleeces and holding beers. They introduced themselves as neighbors, renting a place across the bay. Chloe, being the hostess, invited them to dock and have a drink. Looking back, I hate how easily we let our guard down. They were charming. They told funny stories about their finance jobs in the city and seemed to know a lot about the lake. Jenna and Danny were immediately smitten. Around midnight, the guys suggested we go back to their rental. They claimed they had a hot tub and a fully stocked bar. Jenna and Danny were all in. Chloe was hesitant, but didn't want to be the buzzkill. I, however, was done. I had a pounding headache from the wine, and honestly, I just wanted to sleep in a soft bed, not sit in a hot tub with strangers. "You guys go," I told them. "I'm gonna crash. Lock the door when you leave." They teased me for being a grandma, but eventually they hopped onto the boat with the guys. I watched the little red and green lights of the boat fade across the black water until they disappeared around the bend. I went up to the house, locked the heavy front door, and fell asleep instantly in the guest suite. I woke up to my phone vibrating violently on the nightstand. I groggily picked it up. It was Chloe. The time was 3:17 a.m. "Maya, wake up! Wake up right now!" Her voice wasn't just scared. It was guttural, breathless terror. "What? What's wrong?" I sat up, adrenaline instantly clearing the fog. "Get the keys to my dad's Rover," she whispered. "Drive to the North Service Road. Do not turn on your headlights until you hit the pavement. They took Jenna and Danny." "Who? The guys?" "They aren't renters, Maya. Oh God. I'm hiding in the woods. I saw them hit Danny. You need to come get me, and we need to call the cops. Now." I hung up. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys twice trying to get out the door. I jumped into Chloe's massive Range Rover and tore down the long gravel driveway. I dialed 911 on speakerphone as I drove, screaming our location to the dispatcher. I found Chloe about 2 miles down the road, crouching behind a utility box near the entrance to the old logging trails. She jumped in the car, hysterical. "They threw them in a truck," she sobbed. "A white pickup." They headed toward the highway. We sped toward the main road. The police dispatcher told us to pull over and wait, but Chloe spotted taillights in the distance. "That's them!" she screamed. We followed them from a distance. It was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I was terrified they would see us, or worse, that they would pull over and finish whatever they planned to do. Finally, blue lights flooded the road ahead. A state trooper had set up a roadblock at the highway on-ramp. We watched from 100 yards back as the white truck screeched to a halt. The police swarmed the vehicle with guns drawn. They pulled 3 men out, the same charming finance guys from the boat, and slammed them onto the asphalt. When they opened the back of the truck, Jenna and Danny were huddled under a tarp, zip-tied and beaten, but alive. Later, at the station, we got the full story from Chloe and the detectives. When they had arrived at the rental cabin across the bay, things got weird fast. The guys couldn't get the front door open. They claimed they lost the key and tried to break a window. That's when Chloe realized something was wrong. Who breaks into their own rental? She told the guys she felt sick and walked into the woods to puke. Instead, she hid. From the darkness, she watched the guys' demeanor shift. They stopped being charming. They grabbed Jenna and Danny, who were confused and drunk, and dragged them toward a beat-up white truck parked behind the cabin. The fancy boat didn't even belong to them. They had stolen it from a marina earlier that night to cruise around and look for targets. They weren't neighbors. They were drifters with a history of violent assault who had been squatting in empty winter lodges. If I hadn't stayed behind to answer that phone call, or if Chloe hadn't been smart enough to hide, I don't want to think about where Jenna and Danny would be right now. We haven't been back to the lake house, and I don't think any of us look at charming strangers the same way anymore.